Hello, everyone. I'm back. It's me, James, and I'm going to talk about how I basically taught myself to do comics or really just got my head in that mindset. It's something that I've always wanted to do, but it's not really my field of expertise. For context, I'm a concept artist working in video games, so I know how to, be professional and deliver things and draw basically. But with comic books, it could seem a little overwhelming with the amount of things that you have to juggle. Composition, storytelling, drawing the same person or place, different angles. That's not something you really have to worry about as a concept artist. Usually as a concept artist, you're kind of just like one and done. A lot of times you don't even have to think about the forms. You should. You're supposed to. But let's be honest, you can kind of get away with finagling a few things and not paying any consequences, right? So comic books, you can't really do that so much. So I basically had to like reprogram, I think, the way that I think. So I'm going to walk through some of the exercises that I've done that helped me, or at least got me to a point where I felt like I was ready to start working on something myself. And just a disclaimer, I've never published anything, so this could all be nonsense. So take it with a grain of salt. I'm not trying to tell you this is what you should do. I'm just saying this is what I did, and maybe you'd be interested in this, and maybe you'll learn something, or maybe you won't. Maybe this will totally screw you up and lead you down the wrong path. But also, it's kind of a nice way to kind of go back and see some of the things that I did, because I kind of forgot a lot of the exercises and some of the things that I learned. And so it's kind of exciting to go back and peek through those. Okay, I'm going to say some of my inspiration for what I was thinking about when I was doing this. I guess a lot of this is inspired by after Crash Bandicoot was over. I did so many story drawings for that game that I thought to myself, well, maybe I can do comic books too. Also, I was very inspired by someone I worked with on Crash, Brett Bean. He was literally posting comic strips for work, and I always thought that was really cool. And I'd never seen that before for a video game, and I thought that's like an excellent way to like sell a story, is just post a comic strip. It's kind of like a storyboard, right? I think it's easy in video games and with concept art to kind of forget about story. You're thinking so much about the design. Look at old classic Disney. A lot of those characters are expressed not through the way they're drawn so much as the way they act, and that's a whole other field that you just don't touch with concept art. I think people in animation are more familiar with the concept of acting, but I think acting is the clearest way to sell your character, and not their visual design. Or that's maybe controversial, but a character is based off their actions. I guess that's also with life. You're not based off the way you look, you're based off the things that you do. And it's the same thing with storytelling. So that's an entirely different thing that I had to learn. Okay, I was inspired by like a lot of old 90s guys. I think I said it in the last video already, like Todd McFarlane and the Marvel Method. I'm also inspired by manga artists. I love how much output they do, and they have to, I know it's hard work, but they put out something on such a regular basis. To me, I find that very appealing, because imagine all the things that you can do and the stories that you can tell if you work fast. And of course, they do everything in black and white, and I admire that a lot too. I think manga artists are really great at storytelling. I also like Western comics. I grew up on those things. I was definitely more of an Image Comics kind of guy than the Marvel and DC superhero stuff. But nowadays, if I'm going to read a graphic novel, it's going to be like a graphic novel, not really a superhero comic. And there's always like good manga out there. I was inspired by how fast the Marvel artists work, and particularly Todd McFarlane and Greg Capullo when they worked together. I was listening to an interview, and it was saying that Todd would just call over the phone and give like a brief sentence or two about what the page of the issue is going to be about, and Greg would just draw it. And I feel like, man, that's kind of unorganized, but they had such a process. They could just move forward so fast. And I'm reading Spawn. I've always, I love Spawn. And I don't know that they didn't write a script or plan it out. It just seems awesome to me. And there's a lot of things that way. I think also in manga, there's a lot of just going for it and not knowing what's going to happen on the next page. That's probably not the best way to do everything, But, clearly it works. There's evidence that it can work. And that's something that I kind of wanted to learn, just the ability to just do it. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through some of the things that I did. Some of the projects and exercises I did to prepare myself. But before I start, if you're going to try to do anything like this, I recommend making a rule for yourself. I made a rule for myself that I would never share this with anybody, so that you don't have to worry so much when you're doing it. I think, we all know the pressure of posting or whatever, making it good, I think will hold you back. I think you need to really just make terrible, terrible things, but then, don't show anybody. That's a great promise to make to yourself to help you improve. Of course, I'm breaking that promise for, the sake of posting on YouTube. I never expected to share this stuff with anybody. So some of it's pretty rough. But some of it actually I kind of like, and I didn't think I would. I was kind of embarrassed of it earlier, and now I'm like, hey, this is pretty cool. And sifting through some of this stuff, I think there's some cool things like I might want to bring back, and I definitely learned some things looking at this old stuff compared to what I'm doing now. Okay, so let's look at the first thing that I did. I started a little mini comic strip just to see how well I could do without any type of practice or training. And I think that's always a good way to start anything. Just do the thing you want to do without knowing anything. Go blind, expect the worst, and then assess yourself afterwards. And in this case, I only did 3 pages of some silly little story just to see how I felt about it and what I learned. So let's look. So I had this video game idea that you would be some baker witch lady that would make bread people come to life, and they would fight each other and stuff like that. Instead, I just turned it into a comic idea because I want to do something really quick. And so this is what I was thinking in my head. This is kind of the character. I did some iterations. I think I did some thumbnails on paper for how the story would play out, because the story kind of played out in a dream, and it was, nothing special. This is all like really simple, fast stuff. But I didn't know anything about story at this point. This is basically the days when I could only think about video game concepts. So that's where I was at. I didn't know how to start any of this digitally, so I tried Clip Studio Paint just because they had the reputation for making comics. So I tried a couple of experiments, trying to find a workflow and getting used to their tools and all those things. And that was also part of it. I like to switch up things a lot, like try different software or different approaches. But here's me trying to just do the layout in Clip Studio Paint. It's really messy. I actually didn't really like it. I thought using the tools was very awkward coming from Photoshop. So after I did these, I think I tried to play around with the pens in there a little bit, and there's some nice things, but in the end, I just switched back to Photoshop and I finished it really quick. I just wanted to make a quick little sequence of this witch cooking who knows what, putting in the oven, waiting for it to come out, and there's like a little baby bread man thing. There's no rhyme or reason to any of this. It was just like, what's it like putting one panel in front of another and all that stuff, and getting over that kind of awkward feeling. This is also one of those things I was never going to show anybody this. It's just like, do it for yourself just to know, and then never look at it again. So I haven't looked at this in like the 2 years since I've done it, and some of it's nice, but honestly I don't really like it that much. So what did I learn from making that little comic? I learned that I actually really hated doing it. Yeah, that's what I learned. I basically put the idea of doing anything with comics out of my head. And I focus more on video games, as in, making my own with Godot and learning GDScript and all of that. And I think that actually could be a whole other video of like all the silly little projects that I did in there. Going through that tiny little process made me realize I don't actually like to make the comics, or at least at that time I did not. But I really liked working on video games. But the problem was video games just take too effing long to get anything done. And my artistic abilities were definitely slipping because I spent so much time programming. I was watching like the Harvard Computer Science 101 class and doing the exercises and all that, which is great fun. But it was causing other areas to suffer, and I started to get a realistic picture of what you could do in video games. And I came to the conclusion I just have to do comic books because I can do that by myself. So during this time, I had a pretty good gig lined up, and I had, you know, another baby, a new one, and I took things pretty easy. And when I got to like a good flow with my work and, you know, life, where I felt like I had some more time, I treated myself to the year-long Don Bluth course in traditional 2D animation, where I had like, you know, all the pencils and the pegged animation paper and all that. And that was great to learn, you know, old school 9 Old Men style animation from Don Bluth. But it's maybe not the most relevant skills today because it's all on pencil and all on paper. So maybe it doesn't directly translate into something modern, but it taught me a lot about just art and drawing.
Oh, you poor thing.
And when I find her, I'll feel it.
Especially drawing from your imagination. I know that seems kind of silly because I've been working so long in video games. Like, what, you can't draw from your imagination? And I can, but I think doing animation forces you to unlock parts of your brain that you just don't ever have to worry about. And I feel like those parts of my brain that were unlocked like helped me across the board in every area. It helped me to draw faster, visualize better, you know, draw 3D forms better, and just get ideas out much quicker than I could before. A lot less like trial and error and more deliberate drawing. Also, just naturally with learning animation, you have to think about like the shot and the camera angle and the perspective and the horizon line while you're doing everything else. And I feel like that translated a lot easier into storytelling, because that's what animation is. Basically, it's all storytelling. So 2 of the big things that I wrote down as being super helpful from Don Bluth's class were the concepts of visualization and simplicity. That man takes the most simple approach to every single thing that he does. There's nothing complicated. When you watch videos about how to draw or how to do composition or any of these things, there's all these rules, like this is this kind of shot and this kind of that shot. He doesn't have any of that. Everything is just, basically this is his process, is close your eyes in a nice quiet place and think about your shot in your mind's eye, and then you draw it. And the focal point is where the 1 point perspective vanishing point is. And that's basically it. And a lot of your character designs are just a circle with some lines sticking off for the arms and the legs. Like, everything is so simple. When you look back at his movies and his character designs, you can break down those characters in the simplest forms, like more so than what you would think. They're almost like, if you look at the Preston Blair animation book, you have these really, really simple forms, and you think like, man, this may be a little bit too simple for modern animation. Well, his designs kind of conform to those really simple forms. So that taught me to just like be simple about everything, because you get more done and it's more clear. The more simple you are, the more clear you are. And we always have this habit of overcomplicating everything. And what I've learned is, you know, details and visual noise just complicate story. Like, it can be a cool illustration. There's some illustrators who just are awesome at visual noise, and it works for like a still image where you can just look at it and take it in and like, man, that's so cool. But for storytelling, it's like, I don't recommend it. For storytelling, that's a whole other story, I think. But, you know, everybody has their preferences. I think simplicity equals clarity, and you need clarity to tell a story, in my opinion. So I have learned that mindset of just make everything the most simple approach possible, because that's how Don Bluth did his films. I mean, he storyboarded all those things. He did the character designs for all those things. How can one man do all that stuff? It's because he took the most simple approach, and he had a very powerful imagination. The concept of visualization is something that I kind of feel that we lose a lot in today's world with all the technology, because it's so easy to go back and edit. But in the past, when you're working on a piece of paper, a lot of times with like pen, you have to really think about what you're doing before you do it. You don't have to do that at all anymore. Really, you don't. And so forcing yourself to do that, I think, is a great exercise. And that's why people say, you know, hey, do some studies and practices on paper with pen so you can think about what you're doing before you make a mark. And I find that super valuable. But it's all about visualization. We do have a muscle in our brain that visualizes things. When you're working in Photoshop, you basically kill that muscle. You have to be really aware to keep it alive. Another person that inspires me on this is Miyazaki. Where he closes his eyes and he imagines the scene with a little stopwatch and he times it. Don Bluth does the same thing. I think a lot of people back then did that same thing. It's just close your eyes and watch the movie in your head and then draw it out. There's no reason to do that anymore. So we have to go out of our way to practice these skills. So basically it was doing that Don Bluth class that kind of woke something up inside of me that I needed and helped me a lot artistically. And so I felt more ready to let me just try comic books again. It's basically like animation, right? You're doing it frame by frame, and it's just a much slower frame rate, right? Instead of 24 frames a second that you would have in a film, it's like 1 frame a second or 2 frames a minute or something. It's an animated film, but the timing's different. So that's kind of what I was thinking, and that helped a lot. So I went into again, basically do the 3-page exercise again, but with a little bit more knowledge. And this time I did even less planning. I said to myself, I'm just going to open up Photoshop. I'm just going to start drawing. I don't know what the panels are going to be. I don't know what the story is going to be. I'm not going to practice. I'm just going to draw and see what happens. Nothing's designed. Let's just see where it goes. And that's what I did on the next time, just to experience it. Now, I want to mention during this process, I had a buddy that I would just post everything to, not necessarily looking for feedback or anything like that. I just wanted one person to be accountable for. A lot of times he didn't even say anything. It's just kind of like, hey, I did the layout. I did this panel. I did this, whatever that I did, I would just post it to him, as if it was a job, because that's kind of how I work. Every day, for work, you post what you do, whether it's finished or not. You show it to the client. And so my brain just works that way. And so it was nice to have someone who was willing for me to just spam nonsense in their direction, and it was very helpful. So if that helps you, I recommend it. You can always give that a shot. But again, it's not really for feedback or validation or anything like that. It's just getting in the habit of finishing things and posting them, but not posting all over the internet. I think when you're practicing, I don't think you should share your stuff online. So here's the next project that I did. Again, no planning, no design, just open up Photoshop and go. And this is what came out. I didn't have a direction really. I don't know. I like Batman, so I just thought of buildings and the color black. I did do quick sketches and layout, of course, before I did the ink. But it was all a learning process. The biggest thing is how big should things be to read? I don't know. Some of it was kind of hard. I feel like this guy in the corner is hard to read. So it was this little rocket when you zoom out. So that's something that I guess I became conscious of very quickly. I think it's too crazy to tell what's going on, all the ziggity zags and stuff. I was definitely thinking about Spawn when I was doing that. Yeah, I actually don't really like this page that much. There's some kind of cool things, but this is one of those things, where I say just don't share it with anybody because you don't like it. But here I am sharing it with everybody on YouTube. So I'm not keeping my own promises to myself. But as far as the story goes, I did something very simple. Some guy just flies out of a building and they chase him. And what's going on? I don't know. Who really knows? That's kind of the whole point, is this is a very open-ended thing. Oh, I can see I forgot to put a speech bubble here. So whatever they're saying, I'll never know. But the dialogue is just placeholder. I just made these bubbles and put the words in them. I don't know. I didn't plan any of that out. That's what you call the Marvel method. Just put the bubbles there and somebody will figure it out. And so the next page, yeah, I have a sketch for it. I basically just did sketches and put like a blue color layer to be like blue pencils, like animation. Let's see here. And the ink. So I took away all the blacks because I thought that would be easier to understand what was happening. It's just him running away, basically. Not much going on. I'm still trying to figure out like how I want to do this. That's what the 2 pages look so different. I'm not totally settled at this point. I had a hard time with like knowing how to do like effects, like this gun blaster. It's like I don't really know what I should do, or what does it look like when you have like a stream of a rocket, going through and it intersects with objects in the background. It's like I don't know. I had no feel for that, which is exactly why you're doing this, to kind of try to think about that and feel it out and see what works and what doesn't. Yeah, and this is just the final page where I feel like I put my lessons more into practice. Got the inks going down, and one of the things I feel like I learned from doing the other pages is like just keep it simple. Like I think this is the most simple of all the pages, but I like it the most. Just nice square panels, nothing crazy. And I thought from the previous pages that the flow of the story was going weird, even though there was no story to really flow. And so I thought to myself, like, we don't know how anybody feels about anything. And so I thought, like putting a reaction shot it would be a good idea. So this guy flies into this big mouth, and then you see these guys kind of react to it. Like they stop and then they call his boss or whatever. And then he's here kind of in the aftermath looking at this mouth as kind of a slow moment instead of just like go, go, go. So it was fun to kind of play around with that. I like this one the most. I think there's some cool things. I think looking back at this, it made me realize that I like the comic book format, the US comic book format. The comic book that I'm doing right now is square. So it's basically like this. So like this would be like one page that I'm doing now, but I really like how you can have like so much more going on with just like a normal size page. So I think in the future I'm going to actually do proper comic book pages instead of like weird squares that fit social media. But overall, it doesn't seem like much, does it? Right? Just 3 pages. But if you've never done it before, it's more than you think. And you definitely learn a lot, especially when you go in blind, not really quite knowing what to do. I think that's where you always learn the most, is when you're the most uncomfortable and most unfamiliar with what you're doing, because you learn the lessons naturally, and I think those stick a little bit more. Also, something that helps with any artistic field is just getting better at craftsmanship. So some of the things that I did was practice from the Bridgman anatomy books. I highly recommend those. I'd say they're more advanced because a lot of things are kind of hidden behind the line work, and you have to be able to see them, to see the forms. So I wouldn't start with those, but I feel like if you're working professional now, I'd say get those books. They're super cheap, and go through those things. My approach was based off maybe a rumor or a story, I don't know if this is real, from Frank Frazetta, that he took the Bridgman anatomy book and drew every single drawing in a day, and that's how he learned anatomy. I mean, there's way more to it than that, I'm sure, but that story kind of stuck with me, and so I went through and I drew every single page of constructive anatomy based off this maybe true or not story from Frank Frazetta. And I think that's a good exercise. And you have to learn composition, of course, and camera shots and all that. Even though it's a comic book and you don't have a camera, you're still establishing the shot and the perspective, because that's basically what a shot is. It's just what's your perspective and where are things positioned. You have to do that. Okay, these are some books that just helps with overall drawing and craftsmanship that I think are important. Okay, here's some of the books that I liked. camera's a little awkward, so hopefully you can see that. How to draw comics the Marvel way. This has basically everything in it. I feel like this is probably the best general art book that I know of. It has perspective, composition, anatomy, lighting. It just has like a little bit of everything, and so maybe it seems like it's not that deep because it touches everything briefly, but it's a lot deeper than you think. So like, yeah, the perspective page, it's not that much, right? You have 1, 2, 3 pages on it, but you can write a whole book about that subject. So it's deceptively simple, but it has all the good stuff in it. I think one of the important things to know is the character construction, the proportions of heroic males and females, and why they're different than normal humans. Actually, there's a picture that illustrates that. Yeah, I love this. The Captain America was just like a more normal dude, and why is he different? It goes into that. It's and these kinds of things, the wire figure, just the circles, super important. All this stuff. I mean, you don't have to, dress up this stuff like it does in the book. You can put any style on top of these forms that you want, but the important thing is, just getting that action. I mean, this is basically animated right here. So yeah, more forms, like drawing with the boxes for the figures. That's always great. The head, great head proportions. It gets into some inking and some design, composition. All the basic stuff is in this book. Another book I found very helpful is Framed Perspective. There's 1 and 2. I've only looked at 1, but I kind of just go through it, and I just read it every page. And some of it's more, I guess, practical to use day to day, and some of it's not so much, but I think it's good to have a good idea of all these things. And to know why things look the way they do, like, you don't really have to plot things out, like this complicated plotting out. You don't have to do that today, really. But it's good to know why things look the way they do. There's some really good rules of thumb that you can come up with going through this book. And just like for fun, I would just do all the exercises. This is the only exercise I found that I would do, but basically drawing a circle and a square. But how do you get like a row of squares at the bottom of a square in perspective, and then get the equal length on the other side when it's going to a vanishing point? And the book kind of breaks down how to do that. You never have to do that professionally, honestly, but it's good to have those ideas so it can come more naturally when you're winging it. And of course, framed ink. This is an old book. It's been around for a while, and it has all the compositional basics and stuff. Yeah, the drill. It's good to go through a book like this and read it, and then try to practice it yourself. So that's what I was doing. I have these pages here. Like, I would just go through and find photographs and just take a marker and try to capture the picture in just two values. This one has 3 values, but I always think that's a good exercise. And think about it with framed ink. Like, what's the focal point? Like, here are these 2 people standing at a street corner. It's more important than all the junk going on in the background. I always think it's fun to do these in just ink. Just take a marker, a fat marker, and don't do any details. I think that's always a good exercise. Just little things I would do. Like this, basically, I would read the book and do stuff like this. I'm just showing you what I thought was fun and helpful. Looking at different things. I think these are comic book panels from Chroma, which is a great graphic novel. Of course, Star Wars down here. Just little watercolors. Just make it really tiny, really simple, so it's not a big deal. Yeah, just practicing simplification of different compositions. This is actually from Thomas Paine's book. Not Thomas Paine, different guy. Edgar Paine's book. I totally forgot to put in the pile. Yeah, Composition and Outdoor Painting. Now this is a good book. I think it talks a lot about just like being an artist and like what is an artist. It's good to have someone sit and think deeply about that. But it's stuff like this, this breakdown of different compositions and different ways to balance an image, how to manage details and all this stuff. It's a good book. Yeah, but about composition and stuff. I think it's fun to take films, and this is Star Wars, of course, and don't copy it. Like I intentionally made these different sized frames than what you see on the film, just to force you to take the same compositional elements and rearrange them. So like this square is not how the film was. I don't remember how it originally was, but they're probably further spread apart like that or something. Same thing with this. This is more of a vertical shot. How do you get that same story moment with different composition? I think that's fun to practice, and that helped me a lot. The rare occasion that I draw in a sketchbook. Again, just think about composition, things you learn in framed ink, and how to draw the Marvel way. What is this? The Ronin comic, Chroma, Lucky Luke. Just breaking down the compositions, like nothing fancy. Like don't try to, replicate it exactly. Just get, what are the basic lights and darks and stuff. Yeah, just practicing. Where do people fit, like in a composition? Maybe this is blurry, but whatever this movie was, you got the big guy and the medium guy and the small guy, and they're both looking at him, and it's just getting in the habit of doing that. I feel like film studies helps you the most, at least me personally. All right. And then Bridgman, I talked a little bit about him, but this is the real deal here. Basically this stuff. What I like about him compared to others is everything's squares, and the reason that's important because when you're dealing with values, plane changes equal value change, right? So to think about everything as planes, like flat planes, is super helpful, I think, for constructing figures or really anything. So getting in that mindset is really important, and it's different from traditional. Well, it's different from like the square or the circle head thing. I think the circle heads are great, and I use them all the time, but you got to be careful that things can get a little loosey-goosey on a ball, more so than they can on a square. Yeah, stuff like this. These squares, you gotta be able to see what he's doing underneath this drawing, right? So he shows you right here he's drawing these cubes, but it's a little more hidden in this drawing. Of course, he does have like a plane highlighted so you can see it, but you got to try to find that in all the drawings. I think this is super helpful, breaking down like what are the planes. Like this is really what's important. Like what are the planes? Where do they change? And I like I said, I drew every picture in that book. I lost a lot of my images, but I just do stuff like this. I just copy it exactly, take the notes, just get a feel for it. Looking at something and copying it gives you different information. So I think it's good to copy. Drawing his hands. Those hands, they help a lot. These are copying his hands. And yeah, just copying his hands, getting a feel for it. How does he construct it? Again, like the plane, just knowing that like little plane change helps so much when you're drawing hands from imagination. Or like this kind of shape here I thought was really good. Yeah, they're just like this wedge shape. Because a lot of things are just things wedging into one another and getting a feel for that. Yeah, and then you just practice on photos. I have like a lot more of these. I couldn't find them, but you know, basically you take what you learn from the book and you copy it from a photo and try to apply it. And that's me. This is me doing that here. Again, yeah, like the wedging, the twisting and the turning of the forms and the wedging into each other. Just getting that, like, just sets you so far ahead. Okay, I'm going to talk about some of the books that helped me write and kind of get my head in a story mindset. I think story was the most difficult thing to overcome. In my brain, I could only think about game mechanics. When I thought about a character, I can only think about them in the sense of like, how do they function in a game? Like, what weapon do they have? How do they kill people? You know, that was what I was thinking. Video game characters have like a lot of utility. Like, how do they function in the game? Basically, what kind of murder weapon are they? And going from that mindset into a story is quite a transition. So here's some of the books that I think are pretty neat. Okay, here's some of the books. Here's some of the books that I like for story. Hopefully the sound is better. I'm doing this on my phone instead of the weird webcam mic situation. Okay, so these two books kind of go together. Sid Field's screenplay. You really only need the red one, just screenplay. It's like the most basic formula for like 3-act structure and pretty much covers everything you need to know. If there's one book to read about story, this is probably it. It's not super deep, but I mean, it just tells you like what is the structure, and it talks about the paradigm, if I can find it here. Yeah, there you go. That's what a 3-act structure is. I go through and just like underline anything that I think is important here. One of the exercises that I thought was really good. So this is, you know, a film script format. You know, he has you just take a script like this. You can take this from Chinatown and just copy it. Like open up a screenwriting software and copy it. And it gets you in the flow of how to do it. It's almost like doing master studies as an artist. Just do that with scripts. You don't have to do it very much. You just do a couple paragraphs and you got it. But, you know, that's a good exercise. Okay, but yeah, one of the things that I thought was a good takeaway from this book was basically thinking about your ending first. And that's helped me a lot. Of like, where do you want to go with the story? Because then you can just kind of move everything in that direction. And I think it's a good way to think about it, because without knowing anything about story and structure, I tended to think that you should start from the beginning and kind of do things in a chronological way, but thinking about it in a more structural way, almost like an equation, I think works out a lot. And I think it helps you tell your story a little bit better, to know where you're doing and what you want to say. And the whole process and everything is in this book. And if you really want to go, you know, deeper, the Screenwriter's Workbook is basically a whole book walking you through the process, like holding your hand of like, you know, make this many note cards, write this many paragraphs for this many characters. It's just like a surefire way to tell you how to make your story. So you go through this book, at the end of it, you'll have a story. It's not like a flexible, like figure it out your own. It's like he's holding your hand completely, saying you do it this way. You know, for some people, there's a benefit to that. But at the end, you'll have a story. Now, if you want to go really deep, you know, stories doesn't really tell you so much about like the scripts and how to write them and all that kind of stuff. This is really more about like, what is story? What's the meaning of story? This is a great book. I wouldn't make this the only book that you read, but you know, you could. Yeah, stuff like getting really deep, like, you know, the arc plot, mini plot, anti-plot. I feel like reading these books really help you understand just movies, entertainment in general, plays,
movies, shows, books, all that stuff. He points out anything that's important. I like how he has these little highlights to just tell you important things that stand out. I mean, of course, I make a lot of my own notes, but this helps a lot too. So, story climax. This is what he says it is. A story is a series of acts that build to a last act, climax or story climax, which brings about absolute and irreversible change. And I wrote and meaningful. And of course, everybody talks about Chinatown, don't they? Great movie. But yeah, man, these kinds of things, like really breaking things down. Conflict at any one level. Yeah, whatever. Here's a book that pretty much has all the things in it, and it's the shortest one, is Poetics from Aristotle. There's a lot of different translations and versions of this, but most of this book is notes about the text, like introduction is half the book. And then you have essays at the end. The actual Poetics that Aristotle wrote isn't very much. So it's a pretty short read. It breaks things down very clear, very simple, and it tells you what a story is. Now, these are just inspirational starting point. This is really relevant to people who are artists trying to make a story. Miyazaki's a master at that. One of the things I learned from this book is like kind of the power of intuition. And he comes up with a lot of really clever ideas, almost subconsciously. And he talks about that in here, the concept of, not working from inside your head, but working from above your head, almost like some kind of divine inspiration. And you see that a lot when people talk about story. You even see it in all these other books here. The concept of being intuitive, and even early on in the process, it's just like getting something done. Who cares? Just get it done and then go back and fix it later. That's a reoccurring theme in pretty much anything that you read about how to be creative and do something. But what I like about Miyazaki, man, he's really in the whole process from the beginning until the end, right there with the changes and the refinements. And he talks about it in here, working from a proper old school script versus working from storyboards. And he works from storyboards. It's not totally stream of conscious. Like he has the story figured out and what he wants to say before he starts drawing, which is really important. It's not random. But he talks about that in here. So if you're interested in that, it's good. And this is probably one of the best books on story, even though it's not directly about story, The Power of Myth. It goes into it goes into everything, the meaning of life. Why do we even have religions? Why do we have culture? Why do we have stories in the first place? This is really the thing that covers everything. It doesn't even matter if you're trying to write a story. Many people have read this book and said that it changed their lives, and it really is. It's one of the most important books, I think, that we have today. Is this Power of Myth, Joseph Campbell, which is a series of interviews, and you can watch them, but I think that the video version kind of dilutes a lot of the messages, and I think you really need to take this book and read it yourself, in print, and take it in, think it over, let it go around in your head. You lose so much from the video version. Also, the video version of this edits a lot of it and cuts it out, and they rearrange things. For instance, like they'll have a section, they'll just talk about Star Wars, but Star Wars comes up in multiple places. It's not just like one conversation about it. It's more about like the theme. So the book's a little bit more true to what he's actually trying to say. And then the last thing, I keep a journal of all the stuff that I'm reading, and I try to break down the stories and what's going on. Like what are they trying to say? Where are they going? Every story you have has an opinion. People say, I don't want your politics in my story. Every single story has some type of persuasive, agenda or, something. It could even be like, hey, kids, you need to wash your hands before you eat. That's still some type of persuasive message. Every story has that, no matter what. Be brave, something, anything like that. It's easy when you read these books. It's so much easier to identify what the message is. Like nothing in a story is by accident. If it is, then you don't like it. So I'll try to capture that in here, things that I like, and also structure. I wrote a lot about The Witcher in here. Like I like how those books are structured, the short stories. It's very different in the Witcher books versus how a movie plot would play out, or how TV show plays out. And it's interesting to read the book, like the short story in The Witcher, and then look at the episode from Netflix and see what's different. And I think that's an excellent exercise. And the stuff like that is what I write down here. Medieval poetry too. Okay, next I'm going to talk about another small project that I did. Is really quick, really brief, and I pretty much was doing the process that was in screenplay. And I wrote a story the way that this wants you to do it in a very short form with the note cards and all that stuff. Made a script, and I made a very rough comic on it. And I'm going to go through that next. Okay.
Okay. So I made a little practice comic just to try out the things that I was learning in screenplay and think about story and 3-act structure and all that. And in screenplay, he has you do note cards, and I would show you the note cards, but I lost them. But I did tiny little note cards. I think I had maybe 17. That sounds like too much. Actually, I don't remember how much I had. So whatever it says in that book is how many that I had, even though this is a short, I think, 7-page comic. And the goal was just to find a process. It wasn't to make a comic. It was to find a process that I thought was workable. To find a process and just to test out what I was learning from reading the book. That was the goal of this. So I don't remember exactly what I started with first, but here's the character development. It went through a couple of stages. I don't think I did anything on paper. I couldn't find any paper drawings that I did for this, which is rare. I usually start everything on paper. But I wanted to just have a reference for the characters and how they look next to each other. There's definitely some problems. Now that I look about it, this guy's eyes are way too big compared to all the others. He's definitely off scale. I don't know if that was intentional or not. Yeah, I did my characters kind of off and on throughout the whole process. What else do I have? I have this mean fungus monster, and do I have others? Yeah, a couple other sketches of that guy. These are like just how rough my stuff looks running. And that's him in the jar. But this here is just basically a tool for me to use while I'm drawing the comic and refine along the way. I guess like in an animation or something or a video game, you want to have all this stuff like fleshed out really well. And I think definitely in a comic too, but there comes a point where you spend too much time drawing the characters, you know? So that's a challenge I don't really have an answer to, and that's something I might have to figure out later. Of, the time you spend designing versus the time you spend making something. I kind of consider those two different things, honestly. But I wanted to make something simple. I didn't want super unique characters. They're all wearing the same clothes. They're basically the same character with different heads. Just relying on their shapes to tell them apart. Okay, what else do I got? Recording this awkwardly in different screens here. Okay, so I wrote a script, and I think I said I use the note cards. And here's a scan of a printout. So I used note cards, and then I wrote it out, like they say in screenplay. And then I printed it out and made a bunch of notes. This is just one page. This is not the whole script. The first draft that you make is supposed to be the piece of junk that never goes to the end. It's something that gets completely thrown away and revised. So this is what this is. This is what I did. So I broke it down between the pages, and as you can see, I scratched everything out and I wrote down what I really wanted to write. The constant process of revision. Okay. And here's the version 2 that's cleaned up. Pretty much kind of have things figured out. I'm not reading this, so I don't know if this was the final one or not. I'll show you that here soon. But at this point, it's like, okay, there's only minor changes that I need to make. So, you can see I did the layout for the pages. You probably don't understand what you're looking at, but I kind of do. Looking at it now, it's kind of hard to tell what I was drawing. But, you're working really fast. In the moment, so these sketches are really for you. Maybe, don't wait a week until you do your layouts after you've done a little thumbnail like this, because you'll forget what you're actually looking at. Maybe just do it like right in the moment. But this is how I was laying out my pages. Okay, this is the software I use to write my script. I like it. It's called Writer Solo. It's the free version of Writer Duet, and you don't really need Writer Duet unless you're working with other people. So the free version that you use all by yourself is fully featured and really good. The only caveat is it's web-based, and this is the desktop version you can download. But it makes it a little awkward to open up projects. Like, you can't just go to, there's no like home page that shows you the projects that you're working on earlier. You kind of have to go to the folder that the file's in and open it from there, or go to File, Open, and go to like a Dropbox directory or whatever. But that's complicated, right? But the advantage is using this software, Writer Solo, I could work on any device. So I get really inspired, sitting around in bed, and I was like, oh man, I know how to change that line. I would just take my phone, open up Writer Solo on the phone, and just make those changes right away. And I have like a Bluetooth keyboard. I would hook the keyboard to my phone and to my tablet. So at any moment, I would just whip out my keyboard or my phone, and start typing. And I liked that. I haven't used Writer Solo since I've done this. It was the last thing I did in it, and I'm regretting that because my computer got messed up, and I didn't have access to the script that I was working on currently, because I was working in Fade In, which I really like Fade In. It's just not very good for switching across devices like Writer Solo is. So even though Writer Solo has some weird inconveniences as far as like, opening up the file, I think overall it's better because it's web-based. You can just open it from anywhere. And if your computer goes down, your tablet goes down, your phone goes down, you're going to your friend's house, but you can pull it up on their phone, you can pull it up anywhere. And I think that has a lot more value to me now than I realized in the beginning. Yeah, when you go to import, Google Drive, iCloud, Dropbox, I use Dropbox. You have to go through this process every time you open up something. It's a small price to pay for the flexibility. But yeah, whenever I made a change on the paper, I came back and I put it in here. So this is the final script, and I didn't end up putting all the words, but you can copy and paste them into the comic itself, which is kind of nice. Yeah, I'll scroll through this. I get a quick little thing. Another thing about Writer Solo is that it doesn't put the ugly watermarks on your script and you print them out. If you're using a free version, other free versions put a watermark. There's that. Okay, so this is as far as I took this project, was just the layout of the pages. Like I said, this is all about writing story and doing layout. This is not about getting a finished thing, just about finding process. So this is all I did until I decided that, it served its purpose. But there you go. I think this is, 1, 2. I don't think I would do a comic like this where you make a file that's so huge that it encompasses every page. It can get kind of burdensome to work with. But I don't know how big this is. Yeah, this is pretty big. I think this would be okay for thumbnails, but it's probably better to break these down into individual files, or at least spreads. Yeah, so this is what the layouts look like. Really just only worried about the perspective of the shot and the where the characters are placed. I apparently did not put the speech bubbles. I left the room for speech bubbles, but I'm looking through my folders and I did not sketch in where the speech bubbles go. That's a problem. I found that out later actually on my current project, is that I need to put the speech bubbles like in the sketch first and foremost, because man, you make a drawing Like, I don't know what this guy's supposed to say in this panel, but, you know, it's like, if I would have fleshed this out, you know, you'd had this light on the wall, you know, this hallway and this tunnel, and he, you know, there's these computer screens behind his head. The speech bubbles would obscure a lot of that. I really probably need to push his head way down and make room for the bubble. Same thing here, you know, like all this stuff here would probably get cut out. One of the learning points from this that I found out later is that speech bubble placement is top priority. It must be done as soon as possible. I apologize that you're just looking at these panels without the dialogue. That's okay. I guess if you really wanted to, you could read the script. But it's kind of fun to go back and look at this really silly, like 70s sci-fi story about a sourdough sandwich. Again, looking at this, where would I put the speech bubbles in some of these? Like, it's kind of... I would have caused myself a lot of problems if I finished this. This would have been okay. I could have fit them here. There's enough space. This is where I was done working on it, and this is where I finished. And I moved on to what I'm working on now, which is a much longer thing. And I don't really think that I used much of anything that I learned that I'm talking about in this video. I did something totally different also to just test it out. But I think looking back, making this video, the process that I used for this little sandwich story with the writing the script and doing revisions, I think that's the way to go for me next time. And I think I'm actually going to start doing that for my current story as well. When I plan out the next issue, I'm doing like 3 issues. I just think it's a little tighter. I think working with note cards and then doing the script and that process makes for a much tighter story. So I want to try that again instead of being just so loosey-goosey, whatever happens. That's kind of what I'm doing now, and I think it's a little too loose, a little too goosey, and I want to reel it in a bit. Okay, I hope that was useful or entertaining or whatever. Again, this could all be nonsense. It might not help you at all. I'm just documenting this and putting it out there, and we'll see what happens. Next time, I plan on showing the comic that I'm actually working on and the process that I'm using, which is different than everything that I said in this video. So there's something to look forward to maybe. So thanks for watching, and see you around. Toodles!